The orphan girl who built the biggest farm in the state. Welcome to satisfying drama stories, where family conflict, betrayal, and karma unfold in gripping, emotional stories, with endings that deliver justice. If you love dramatic twists, relatable characters, and satisfying revenge arcs, you're in the right place. New stories every week. If you enjoy stories about resilience, family, and second chances, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It helps this story reach more people, and it helps this channel keep growing. Now, let's begin. Annie was 13 years old when her father died. She had already lost her mother years before, back when Annie was still a baby, too young to hold onto a single memory of her. Her father had raised her alone on their small farm, out where the roads turned to gravel and the nearest neighbor was a mile down the road. He taught her how to read the soil with her hands, how to know when rain was coming just by the smell in the air, and how to coax life out of a stubborn patch of ground. When he passed, it felt to Annie like the whole world had gone quiet. She had no one left, except for an aunt who lived far away in the city. The county placed her with that aunt, since there was no other family to turn to. But the city was nothing like the life Annie had known. The apartment was small and loud, stacked, high above a busy street that never seemed to sleep. There were no fields to walk through in the morning, no dirt under her fingernails, no father calling her in for supper. Annie tried to adjust. She really did. But every night, she lay awake missing the creak of the porch swing and the smell of turned earth after a spring rain. She couldn't do it. Within a few weeks, she packed a small bag and left before sunrise, making her way back to the only home she had ever known. When the state found her, they tried to send her back to her aunt's house. Annie looked the caseworker straight in the game, and told her plainly that it wouldn't matter how many times they brought her back. She would run away again, and again, and again, until they stopped trying. Her aunt, worn down and unsure of what else to do, finally gave in. She agreed to release a small monthly allowance from Annie's father's life insurance policy, enough to help the girl get by, and she allowed Annie to return to the farm that had always felt like it belonged to her, long before it legally did. The farm itself was set to become hers outright when she turned 18, a promise her father had written into his will years before anyone imagined she would need it so soon. Back home, Annie was far from alone, even if it sometimes felt that way. The neighbors, good country people who had known her father for years, kept a quiet watch over her. They brought over plates of food wrapped in foil, checked in on her when the weather turned rough, and made sure she never went without the basics. It wasn't charity, not really. It was simply how people looked after their own out there, and Annie had always been one of theirs. With the small allowance she received, Annie bought seed and fertilizer, and she poured herself into the tomato fields her father had once tended. She worked from sunup to sundown, learning as she went, asking questions when she didn't know the answers, and paying close attention to the way the plants responded to her care. She had always loved growing things. There was something about tending a plant, watching it grow from a fragile seedling into something strong and full of life, that felt like healing to her, even if she couldn't have explained it that way at the time. That first season, her 10 acres produced a bumper crop of tomatoes unlike anything the county had seen in years. The vines hung heavy with fruit, red and ripe and perfect. Annie hauled crates of them to the local farmers market every weekend, and soon restaurant owners started reaching out directly, wanting to buy straight from the source. Word spread quickly through the small community. People began talking about the young girl, barely a teenager, who was growing the best tomatoes anyone had tasted in years. Annie saved nearly every penny she earned. She didn't spend on anything she didn't need. Slowly, carefully, her bank account began to grow. Dollar by dollar, season by season. By the time her second spring rolled around, she had read enough about farming to understand the importance of crop rotation, and she planted garlic and peppers alongside her tomatoes, giving the soil a chance to recover and thrive in new ways. Her days were long. In the mornings and afternoons, she worked the fields. In the evenings, after the sun went down and the fields fell quiet, she sat at her kitchen table and homeschooled herself, working through textbooks by lamplight, determined. Not to fall behind just because her life looked different from other kids her age. Nobody was forcing her to do it. She simply understood, somewhere deep down, that her father would have wanted her to keep learning, no matter what path her life had taken. The years passed this way, one harvest after another, each one a little bigger and a little more successful than the last. Annie grew from a grieving 13-year-old girl into a sharp, capable young woman who knew her land better than anyone. When she turned 18, everything that had once felt like a distant promise finally became real. She received the remainder of her father's life insurance money, and the deed to the farm was officially transferred into her name. It was hers now, fully and completely, just as her father had always intended. She didn't slow down. If anything, turning 18 only pushed her forward. Combining her savings with the money from the life insurance policy, Annie purchased an additional 100 acres from a neighboring farm whose owner was ready to retire. She hired 2 new helpers to keep up with the growing workload, and before long, she had built the largest vegetable farm in the entire county. Her crops were in high demand, not just at the local markets anymore, but from buyers who drove in from neighboring towns just to get produce grown on Annie's land. She loved every bit of it. The early mornings, the ache in her back after a long day of harvesting, the smell of fresh soil. All of it felt like proof that she had built something real out of nothing but grit and a little bit of stubbornness. Eventually, she decided it was time to build something else too. A new home. One she designed herself. One she could be proud to call her own. By the time she turned 20, Annie was standing on the porch of a beautiful new house, built with her own 2 hands and the money she had earned through years of hard work. But she still wasn't finished. She kept expanding, buying up more land whenever the opportunity arose, refining her methods, and building relationships with buyers across the region. Within a few more years, Annie's farm had grown into the largest vegetable operation in the entire state. It was almost hard to believe, looking at how far she had come from that scared 13-year-old girl who had run away from a city apartment just to get back to a small 10-acre farm. Eventually, Annie hired a farm manager to help oversee the day-to-day operations, someone she trusted completely, and for the first time in years, she allowed herself to slow down, just a little. She still kept a close eye on everything, walking the fields most mornings and checking in on every corner of the business she had built from the ground up. But she also finally gave herself permission to breathe, to rest, and to enjoy the life she had worked so hard to create. One evening, as the sun dipped low over the fields she had spent her whole life tending, Annie sat out on her porch swing. The same kind of swing she remembered from her childhood, the wood creaking gently beneath her. She looked out over the land that stretched as far as she could see, land that had once been just 10 small acres and a grieving girl's stubborn refusal to give up. She thought of her father, of everything he had taught her, and everything he had given her without ever meaning to give it all at once. Quietly, under her breath, she whispered a thank you to him, for giving her the perfect start to a life she had come to love more than she ever thought possible. If this story touched you, please consider giving it a like and subscribing to the channel for more stories just like this one. It truly makes a difference and helps this channel continue sharing stories worth telling. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.